Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our big episode of the week. Of course, Success Thursday is the topic of today. And we have with us this week, Patty Aluskewicz. Hey, Patty, welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And of course, we're going to talk about success. But before we dive into that, share with us, what's your favorite retrospective format and why?
Yes, I love retrospective. I didn't used to, but many years ago, and this is like 2011, I went through yoga teacher training, and that really taught me to be very self-reflective. So that's where my retrospective journey started, and I realized the importance of it. But it is challenging because a lot of times people don't want to look at themselves in the mirror or look at the team in the mirror. It's difficult. It's uncomfortable. In addition to, in our previous episode, I was talking about this problem-solving canvas that I created. I'm going to say, other than that, one of my favorite retrospectives is the Sailboat. I love that one because, first of all, it's very simple. It's, the visual is a sailboat. There's an anchor, like what held us back. There's the sail with what's the wind in our sails. There's the sunshine with, what's going really well. And there might be like an iceberg or a mountain coming up or something coming up in the distance that might be the roadblock that we're going to maybe run into. I'm a visual person, so I love using Miro or something visual to show these images of the anchor and the wind and the sun and the iceberg, because to me it makes the connection of the problem or the challenge and that image. And that is something that is really strong because of my educational background, my teaching background, that I understand that making those connections is really key to people remembering the information afterwards. So I'm going to say that one.
And I think that's a great retrospective format. The problem-solving canvas that you mentioned yesterday, I think that was also a great idea. I really loved how you described that. So I'm looking forward to seeing more on that myself as well. But of course, we run these retrospectives because we want to be successful and we want to help the teams be successful more than anything. So let's describe that for our listeners, Patty. What do you call a successful Scrum Master? What does that mean for you?
A successful Scrum Master is somebody who walks the walk. To me, that is the number one thing that I, as a Scrum Master and now as an Agile coach, need to always be mindful of. Because people will trust, and this is human nature, people will trust people that do and say the same thing. Whether you do something bad and say something bad, right? They trust that. If you do something positive and say something positive, people trust that. But when you say something positive and do something negative, there's a rub there. People see it, whether it's subconscious or whether they're aware of it. So for me, coming into a team, if I'm going to say we need to have a tough conversation, I need to be willing to have tough conversations myself. And this is where it goes back to, I've had personal coaches for many years because I know what it's like to be in the coachee position, to be uncomfortable, to trust somebody to help me over my uncomfortable obstacles and see some success. So as a Scrum Master or Agile coach, showing up and saying, I'm in this with you. I'm uncomfortable too. I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone here too. It's uncomfortable for me to sit in silence and wait for somebody to speak in a retrospective when nobody wants to speak. And I think it goes a long way when people in front of you see your vulnerability, because then they feel comfortable doing it as well.
How do you keep yourself accountable? Because it's definitely not easy to take that position, to show vulnerability and to be mindful of walking the walk, as you just described. What is your, I don't know, weekly routine, or how do you do that personal self-reflection in order to stay focused and stay grounded?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in personal retrospective and self-reflection. I'm naturally a thinker, so I think and sometimes it goes too far down the rabbit hole. You got to be careful. But I, as I mentioned in the previous episode, in 2011, 2012, I started practicing yoga, and I went through a teacher training and became an instructor myself. And that it's a practice for a reason. You practice being very mindful of when you are bumping up against your comfort zone and realizing that you're safe. There's no tiger coming to kill you, that you're safe. You can take a step. And once you take the step, you realize, wow, I'm okay. I'm still alive. And I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but sometimes in the human mind, you become very convinced that you're not going to survive. Even though, again, that goes back to this like lizard brain from when we were in the caves, right? But realizing that if I am not attempting, if I'm not successful in a pose and I tell myself I can't do this yoga pose, sometimes it's in my head. And it's because I'm not trying, because my mind talks me out of it before I even attempt it. So just being mindful that translates to everything I do as a Scrum Master and Agile coach. When I'm avoiding something, really sitting back and saying, what's going on here? Why am I avoiding this?
I really like that
taking
as you describe it, because I see when working with teams, I see teams doing the same. But what I've realized over the years is that the reason why I see teams doing the same is because I have practiced seeing myself doing that. And I think that aspect of practicing on yourself, so like being mindful of what you're doing, is what helps us in the end being mindful of what the team is trying to do.
Correct. And like I mentioned before, whether it's in a one-on-one conversation or even in front of a group, saying, this is uncomfortable, but we're going to work through this together. I'm uncomfortable too, but look, I'm showing up and I'm still doing the thing. And I think the last thing I want to point out here is having like follow-up conversations and pointing, whether it's an individual or a team, back to, do you remember where we used to be? Do you remember where we were? Look at how much we've overcome. And by focusing people on how much they've achieved, it gives them the courage to take that next step. Because the next step, the uncomfortable step, they never stop. The tough thing always shows up, but you have to have the courage to keep taking the step, because chances are it does become more difficult.
Absolutely. And that's a very important lesson for all of us. Reflection starts with us, self-reflecting. Thank you for sharing that, Patty.
Yes.
Part of a successful Scrum Master job is to help the product owner. Tomorrow we explore that critical role in Scrum, the product owner role. Tune in to learn about product owner anti-patterns, what you can do to help the product owner, and a real-life example of what a great product owner is and what made it so. Tomorrow on our Friday Product Owner episode. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.